Welcome to another edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling, and this episode isn't going to be long, but it's a couple things that I would like to go over with you. A couple new albums that I just picked up. I don't normally do strictly reviews, but sometimes I have. You've seen in the past that I've done reviews of albums, maybe with a few other things mixed in. This time I want to talk about a couple of artists that I've been a big fan of since the mid to late 80s, and both of them have something in common insofar as I haven't really been impressed by much of what they've done since early to mid 90s, if I'm being generous, for the most part. And they both released new albums this year, and I'm going to talk about them. And the artists are Bon Jovi and Bryan Adams. I will forever identify as a fan of Bon Jovi and Bryan Adams, but the truth of the matter is that me being the age that I am, I got into them when they became really, really popular, which in Bryan Adams' case would be around 84, 85, and Bon Jovi's case would be 86. Have followed them ever since, but both of them went down sort of different roads musically, and some I could follow, most I could not. But anyway, we'll go over these two new albums. I talked about the Bon Jovi album very, very briefly in the Rolling Stone Top 50 Hair Metal albums, because I had just picked up this new Bon Jovi album. It's been up for a couple months now or so, maybe a little longer. This is Burning Bridges. And this is a very, very low-key release. It's the very final Bon Jovi album to be released on... it doesn't even say, well, yeah, it's Mercury Records again. Mercury Records was distributed by Polygram, was bought up by Universal. At one point, their albums were distributed by Island. But the fact of the matter is that John Bon Jovi, who was only ever signed as a solo artist, I don't know if most people know that, but the Bon Jovi band, they were his musicians, and that's just how it was. But he wanted them to be identified as a band. So he states in a recent article that I read online that he's the longest serving artist on Mercury Records, or as he says, whatever you want to call it these days. 32 years on the same label. It's kind of unheard of. This album is the last one to come out, the last new album material. I'm sure they'll be putting out compilations and live albums or whatever to, because that's what record labels do. So it makes sense to me that this album came out without a lot of fanfare. As a matter of fact, this comes in a single cardboard sleeve. There are no credits. This is the disc itself. I read more information on this album from Wikipedia than I did from actually purchasing the album. This album, like a lot of their recent ones, is produced by John Shanks. It's got 10 songs on it, which is relatively short nowadays. I'll read you the song titles. Teardrop to the Sun, We Don't Run, Saturday Night Gave Me Sunday Morning, We All Fall Down, Blind Love, Who Would You Die For, Fingerprints, Life is Beautiful, I'm Your Man, and Burning Bridges. And I really, really, really tried to get into this album. This band was so important for me getting into hard rock music, and their first 4 albums are all tops, in my opinion. I mean, Slippery When Wet was the one that introduced them to most of the world, myself included. New Jersey's my favorite. I love the first 2 albums. Keep the Faith was a little bit different, but I loved it too. After that, they don't have any more 10s, in my opinion. They've got great songs here and there. When It's My Life came out in 2000, I thought, okay, this is more like it. But just, they got really... I mean, look, a band and an artist has the right to do whatever the heck they want to do, and I'm just one fan. But that doesn't mean that every fan has to follow them. And I don't have all of the albums that came out. I did not buy their 2007 album, Lost Highway, which was their country album. I would rather be shot in the face. I don't have their 2013 album. I think it was called What About Now. Haven't heard a thing off of it. I kind of just know that what I'm about to expect, probably more like this. The first release that came out by them that I made it a point not to buy was the 2003 album called This Left Feels Right, which is when they took some of their older songs and re-recorded them in acoustic form. Not that there's anything wrong with acoustic form, but I don't know, adult contemporary, or just really bad pop. And that's a lot of what they've been doing if they haven't been doing their bro country stuff. So far removed from the band that I got into many, many years ago. And I'm afraid that this album is more of the same. I saw a lyric video for We Don't Run. Wasn't crazy about it. And it is far and away the best song on here. I bought this cheap, and I still paid too much for it. Sorry. So, don't want to end on a sad note, so I mentioned Bryan Adams as well. Another artist, I mean, when Cuts Like a Knife and Reckless came out, that was for a guy like me that was interested in guitar-based music, but still a fan of pop music, listening to just top 40 radio. You really couldn't go wrong with what Bryan Adams was doing at the time. And I've kind of followed along ever since. And I think it's more symptomatic of a single artist than a band, that it's a lot easier to get mellow, maybe prematurely. I mean, in a lot of cases, Bon Jovi is a single artist. It's him calling the shots. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, very, very important factor to that album, the Bon Jovi album, it's the first album that doesn't feature Richie Sambora, which is another big black mark against it, in my opinion, although he does co-write one song on it. But Bon Jovi without Richie Sambora? I'd rather hear Bon Jovi without John Bon Jovi. Honestly, I'd rather hear them with another singer. I know that would never ever happen in a million years, but just my opinion. But Bryan Adams, I mean, he could write wonderful ballads, and he had a few that were, slight hits from some soundtracks. That kind of took him off the radar of the rock audience, unfortunately, because he was still writing rock songs. It's just that they weren't really the singles, and they were kind of getting more few and far between. And like Bon Jovi, I haven't got all of Bryan's catalog. It's hit and miss. This new album that just came out is called Get Up. This has been really hyped, mostly on his own Facebook page, hailed as a return to form. Well, I mean, everybody says that. They want to gain interest from the old fans. I'm going to say yes and no to that. He has reunited with his longtime writing partner, Jim Vallance. I mean, the two of them just churned out hit after hit after hit, not just for themselves, but for other people. And not just hits, the album tracks. Great songs, just great songwriting chemistry. And Vallance does co-write, I think, everything on this album. But what defines this album is not the co-writer, but the producer. None other than Jeff Lynne. Jeff Lynne of Electric Light Orchestra fame and Traveling Wilburys, and producer on his own right for Tom Petty. And basically this album sounds like Traveling Wilburys album with Bryan Adams on vocals. Some of it's kind of rockabilly. It's got that, I don't know how to describe the drum sound. It's a really loud, distorted, almost drum sound, but very easy to listen to. I'm actually kind of taken with this album. It's a fun album to listen to. It's very short. It's a very, very short album. I just got the regular retail album. It's got 9 songs on it, and I don't even think that it would total 25 minutes. I can almost listen to this album driving to my work, which is about a little less than a half an hour drive. There are also 4 acoustic versions of some of those songs at the end of this, which I haven't listened to all the way through yet. But, I mean, even if you were never really a fan of Bryan Adams back in the day, if you just like fun, sort of old-time rock and roll music, I would recommend picking up Brand New Day. So, unlike the Bon Jovi album, this Bryan Adams one is an album by a veteran artist that, in my opinion, is actually worth spending the dough on. These are just my opinions. That's for what they are worth. Thanks for taking the time to watch this episode of Tim's Vinyl Confessions.